Otra vez entre tus brazos. Te quería decir no sé qué cosa, pero callé tus labios con mis besos. Y así pasaron muchas horas. Amanecí otra vez entre tus brazos. Te quería decir no sé qué cosa, pero callé tu boca con mis besos. Y así pasaron muchas horas.
Hey baby, ¿qué pasó? No que yo era un vato. Hey baby, ¿qué pasó? No me dejes de ese modo.
My name is Eugene Jean Buddy Lobato, and I was born way back in the good old days of the Depression.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror. We have a long way to go, but we are on the way.
I was born in Chama, Colorado. My mom was Enriqueta Shuri Lobato, and my dad was Emilio Lobato. Well, I had 10 brothers and sisters that lived to be adults. My oldest sister was Bessie. The second one was Henry, and then Louis, and then Ella, Anita, Tilly, and Ray, and myself, Buddy, and then Henrietta, and then my youngest brother, Emilio Jr.
I was born April 11, 1936 to Julian Lucero and Charlotte Cardenas Lucero. My mother had invited my first cousin Maxine Maxwell and stepbrother Tony Maxwell to baptize me. And in those days the parents didn't go to the church. The godparents just took you to the church themselves. My first cousin Maxine decided, instead of using the name my mother gave her, which was Rita, she used Josephine because it was her mother's name. So I was named Josephine Gloria Lucero, and she told me later that I needed to remember that when I had my first daughter, that I should name her Rita so that I could fulfill her commitment to Saint Rita. So that's why I have my oldest daughter is Rita. Well, there were 7 brothers and sisters, 8 with myself. My sister Lori, my brother Adolph, Eileen, and Virgil, and Art, and then myself. I was number 4, and then Julian Jr. He was named after my dad, and then Arthur and Billy. His first name was Leroy, but we called him Billy, and he was the baby. So there was 8 of us.
My mother was a postmaster in Chama, Colorado for about 50-some years. I don't know. Ever since I can remember, she was a postmaster in Chama. They claim that with his post office, she was able to send most of his children to college.
Was it unusual for a woman to hold a job at that time?
Yes, it was very unusual. But my mom was, she was a well-educated lady. She had gone to work to school here in Denver, and she went to school in San Francisco and California, someplace, and back. And then she went back to school in San Luis. My grandfather was a very well-educated man, so she taught her family, and they encouraged him to get an education, just like my dad and my mom did.
It was a hard childhood because they struggled very hard to financially. Both my parents struggled hard. About the time I entered high school, my dad was really into drinking. And so from then on, he just went downhill. My father was okay. The first few years they were married. He was the one that laid all that rock in San Luis and the bridges and stuff. He worked for the county. When you have an alcoholic father or anything that's wrong with your parent or brother or whatever, it usually reflects on you quite a bit. Although I didn't let it bother me as much as you might think. I just went on with my everyday life. I didn't let it ruin my confidence. And I was valedictorian that year. And I earned a 4-year scholarship to Mercy High School, which was the only high school we had there. But it was tuition paid, so that was great. My mother was wonderful. She was a very stable lady, a very religious lady. She was a very good seamstress. She sewed for everybody in the community, so she was always busy. I was always learning how to do something. I wanted to learn how to bake. I wanted to learn how to cook. I wanted to learn. And so I was always helping. I was her helper.
I went to school in Chama, and then until 1947. In 1947, they sent me to Boulder to stay with my sister and my brother-in-law in Boulder. I went to school at Sacred High School. I think a big deal for me because I have never been out of Chama, and I have never really had any classmates that spoke English. And I was speaking Spanish, so it was kind of hard at first. But then afterwards, I got the hang of it, and I did real good. I learned a lot. And I went to Boulder. I used to go to the university. I spent a lot of time up there to classes and operas and everything else. Just because I was there and nobody told me not to go, so I went in there. So I learned a lot by going and doing whatever I wanted to because there was nobody to tell me different. And anyway, after that, I went back to Chama and I helped my dad. Went to school in San Luis, Mercy High.
It's interesting how life works out. My mother, her mother was Mormon. She was not Catholic. But she raised her children Catholic because she married a man who was Catholic. But at the age of 32, he deserted her with all 6 children. By then, all her children were either teenagers or they were ready to get married and go on their own. Some of them. My mother was not at that age. And it's funny, one of the strangest things I ever saw was my grandmother lived in Chama for a while. From Cuesta, New Mexico, when my mother was 7, and they lived in Chama. There was no welfare then. So there was no way for a woman with children to feed her children. So she farmed them out. And my mother went to Jose Lobatos, who is my husband's grandfather. She lived with them for about 7 years. My mother probably learned to be a seamstress from the time when she was living with your great-great-grandmother. But like I say, it's interesting how life works out.
I keep my eyes wide open all the time because you're mine. I walk the line.
I met Grandpa when I went to high school. He was at Mercy High School, and he was a big junior, and I was a freshman. He was good looking.
I think it was her blue eyes. She was the most beautiful girl in the whole world. She still is.
Was quite a talker. He was very arrogant. I guess it's true that opposites attract.
Did you take Grandma to prom?
I was very sick. I was dying. That's why I couldn't take her to the prom. I was dying. I was very sick. I got the flu. So they sent my brother Emilio instead of me. My brother took Mama to my prom.
Uh, Grandpa graduated 2 years ahead of me, and when I was a senior, that's when we were talking more serious.
Did you ever date anybody before Grandma?
Oh my God.
How did he propose?
Actually, never really proposed. He just talked about we're going to be married. You know, that was pretty much the way the guys did it then. They found it so hard to speak up.
I was very popular. I was very good looking and very cocky. I was Mr. Fancy. In fact, I had leather jackets and everything, engineer boots, and I was very cocky. And I was Mr. Cool. Hi, baby, how you doing, baby?
He went for his blood test because you needed to have a blood test in
get
those
married?
days. Yeah, you needed to have a blood test. I really don't know what the purpose of the blood test was, but it was Colorado law. We needed a license, and he got there on a Saturday. I mean, he went Friday night, but it was a Saturday when we were together to be able to get a license. Well, lo and behold, the clerk and recorder was not in the courthouse on Saturday, and then he had gone out of town. So we were really stuck, and we needed a license to get married. So we are not registered to get married in Costilla County. We're registered in Conejos County because we went all the way down to Conejos County, uh, which is Antonito. And we went to the courthouse, and they didn't have any lights. They didn't have electric lights yet. So, and they didn't have any kerosene lights either, lamps. So we used a candle, and we lit a candle, and he was able to find the papers that we had to sign and all that. And that's how we got our license. Really a freaky thing, but that's the way it happened. Things were not traditional for us.
Can you tell us about your wedding day with Grandma?
Oh boy, my wedding day. We went. I was working here in Denver. I had just started working in Denver, and I went. It was for Labor Day. We went up there, and we didn't even get a license or nothing. We were so unprepared.
Almost the whole community came to that wedding, and they were in and out. I think they were still feeding people at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Our dance was at the gym. The gym was brand new in 1954. That's when I graduated from 8th grade. It was brand new.
From Franquito Mes from Amalia, New Mexico. He played on our wedding, and
Frankie's band, I called it. Was very good music, the best music.
it was packed. I mean, it was everybody and their grandmas. Everybody went to that dance.
Everybody donated for the cake, and we ended up with enough money to pay off the music. And so it wasn't really, we had a real slim beginning as far as financial went when we got married and moved to the city. But we had our hopes and dreams, and we were together. That's all that mattered.
3 coins in a fountain, each one seeking happiness, thrown by 3 hopeful lovers. Which one will the fountain bless?
Little lady, hey, little lady. Yo cuando estaba joven y la chava está parando, Ahora estoy viejito, no lo hago ni sentado camataya, yupi yupi yeah. I'm an old cowhand from the Rio Grande, and I come to town to beer the band. I know all the songs that a cowboy know, 'cause I learned them all and on the radio. Yippee yeah.
He could have had a career in the ranch or farm with the sheep if he wanted to, but his mother gave him $20 so he could get on the bus and come to Denver. No car, no nothing, just
I had worked all my life in the farms and ranches, so when I came to work in Denver, they always addressed me as a plowboy or the Mexican. From the bottom, being the poor plowboy to a poor Mexican, all the way to becoming a production supervisor. I used to run the plant from one end to the other, and I was very proud of the work that I did. And that's how I managed to support my family. What?
Did you change your name?
My original name was Jose Eugenio Leopoldo. Everybody was named Jose, Jose Adelmo, Jose Francisco. Everybody knew me as Buddy, and it wasn't Buddy. I went to get my my driver's license. That's when I found out that I had to have a real name.
Oh, seriously? It threw you off that you couldn't have Buddy on your driver's license?
So I just said Eugene. I changed it to Eugene Joseph.
what happened to people like us. When we came to the city, we weren't quite prepared for racism, for people that were racist.
We knew English. We had learned it in school, and we used very little English, only when we had to. The rest of the time, we always spoke Spanish. All our classmates, everybody spoke Spanish.
My brother, older brother, Virgil, he had darker hair than I did, and he had brown eyes. Our parents decided it'd be okay if we went to a movie. We could go to a movie. It was an afternoon matinee. And we went into the theater, and they must have had a policy of whites on that side and the ones that didn't look white, or to them. My brother wasn't that dark, but he'd been out and he might have been sunburned. Anyway, I was blonde and blue-eyed, and I really had blonde hair, blue eyes. So he pushed me in the direction of the one side and told him he had to go to the others. So I started crying. Deal was, they recognized that we were not white. That was what they recognized, that we were not exactly the same color as they were. we were, but we weren't. You know what I mean? We weren't black. We weren't Native American. So what were we? If they asked us what we were, we would say Spanish.
Spanish American, Spanish.
I always looked at it this way, and I used to tell my kids this: if they ask you what you are, tell them you're an American, because that's what we are. We're Americans.
Nobody was going to tell us what to do. They weren't going to take advantage of us. We, like I said, we come on, make my day. But we didn't took no bullshit.
I was told that at one time they had signs in Alamosa, no Mexicans allowed. We were a different culture altogether, but they probably didn't know the difference. I didn't even know what the word discriminate meant until I came to the city.
We didn't know the culture of the Anglo.
One of the things I noticed was I couldn't understand their jokes. Their jokes were kind of a little weird to me because I couldn't get the punchline.
But it was because
The punchline?
The punchline, or whatever you call it. I just couldn't get
They
it.
used to try to make fun of us, but that's the reason I almost lost my other finger.
What do you mean? It's the reason you almost lost your other finger.
Giving it away.
He was always quite the defiant one, huh? Yeah.
These He's a family man who enjoys the peace and quiet of his little home.
Oh my, we had the best looking kids on the world and smart. All of them were very, very smart.
Rita was born, I went to the hospital at 7 o'clock in the morning, and she wasn't born until 5 o'clock in the morning, in the evening. But it was my first baby, and I was scared to death. He sat right there by me, but I never screamed once. There was a girl right next to me that was screaming out of this world, and it was scaring me badly.
I never heard Mama scream with none of her children. No, she used to have her babies, and that was it.
But Rita was born at 5 o'clock. It was raining by the time she was born.
It was raining and the sun was out.
August 18th.
And they used to say that the devil was spanking his wife.
When it what?
That the devil was spanking his wife.
I was trying to breastfeed, and she had such a tiny little mouth, and I had never had a baby, remember, and my mother was far away. I just had him, and he knew about sheep, but he didn't know about babies. And Jean was born in September, on September the 20th. Jean was the best baby you could ever think about. He was gentle. He cooed a lot, but he wasn't he didn't cry a lot. The one that had the most unusual birth, I think, would be Armand. Born in September the 20th, 2 years after Jean.
I went and I was going to take a shower so I could sit down and watch Gunsmoke or something.
And suddenly my water broke. And I had to yell for him. And he couldn't even take a shower. He was all wet already, but he got out of there and got dressed, and we left right away. And we just barely made it to the hospital. He put me on a wheelchair and took me in.
The nurse said, "I'll take over," and she took over while I went to sign Mama in.
I was already giving birth, so they just cleaned us up, and we were back in the hallway. He was coming up after filling out the papers.
I met Grandma, Mama, and Armand said, "Hi, Daddy."
I think I was a couple of days overdue with Rose. So I went in at 10 o'clock at night, and this dumb nurse thought she was doing me a favor. She gave me a sleeping pill so that I could go to sleep and get a good night's rest. And he went home because he thought nothing was going to happen.
He told me she won't be born until
and he had just gotten to the house and gone in the house when he got a phone call. I went in the bathroom. I could hardly stand in the bathroom because I was sleepy. And I went back and I pushed the bell on the bed. And she came in and she said, "Oh, she's going to give birth really soon. We better call the doctor." Dummy. and Rose was the cutest baby you ever saw. Vernon was born at
¿Qué no te acuerdas que no estabas ahí?
yeah, I remember. I do remember. I was there.
Or were you there?
Where were you? Where were you?
Next to you.
He was born. He was a cute little boy. He was a real bright little boy. No complications. Born around 10 o'clock in the evening, and Gina. Now that was an unusual birth. Gina was born at 11 o'clock in the morning, and we lived on Cherry Street already. It wasn't quite June, and her little nails didn't look like they were quite formed when she was born. She was a little premature, I think. And she was so pretty. She was such a cute little girl. And Joe, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I knew I had to go to the hospital. So we hurried, and she was a real cute little baby too. She was a roly-poly little baby, but she picked up easy on things. Milo was bad. He's quite a few years younger than Joe, and Grandpa took his vacation when Milo was going to be born because we needed someone to take care of all those kids. And he was cooking and everything. My body was pretty exhausted, I think. Who's our favorite? Who's our favorite of all the kids? I don't think you have favorites when you have a lot of kids. He's always putting his picture on my telephone saying he's the favorite.
Who?
Armand. We used to fight the most, Gina and Joe. That's easy. Jean and Armand got along really well. Rita was the mom of all the broods.
I was always very proud of them. I was always very proud of my children. And they did very, very good for themselves. All of them went to college. But the only one that didn't go to college was Rosie, but she was very smart. And she was just as good as she had gone to college. Because we used to help them a little bit, but when they went into college, they did it on their own. All of them were funny. All of them, they were all cute babies. I still am already 80-some years old, and I still remember them, what they used to do this, that, and the other. And our children were our number one in our lives. Everything that we did was for our children.
There was never a dull moment, I can tell you that.
The reason I moved back to San Luis was because at that time I was very sick. I was about ready to have a nervous breakdown. I was very sick, working too hard, and everything else was piling on me, so I decided to go back to San Luis and start ranching, which had always been my dream. Some of my land, I acquired it a long time ago I bought some of that land from my dad, up to at the canyon at the 40 acres. And then the other land, I bought it when we moved up there in St. Louis. Well, I had 40 acres in Canyon, 25 acres in Chama. I had about 73 acres at Jaroso, and then I had about 80 acres uplands. So I had quite a bit of land, but none of it was too productive at the beginning because it had been abandoned for so many years. I had to get back to production stage, and I used to have it raise enough grass to feed my cows during the winter. When I went back, I found that the road going to my place up there at the 40 was completely blocked. They had a barricade about 40 feet high.
Who did?
The Taylor people. Before Taylor came in, that land was being used like for the local people, for the people to gather wood, to go hunting, fishing, recreation, and pasturing their animals. When he came in, that was stopped because he said that this is my land. All the bad blood was when these two young men from El Rito went over. They were looking for some cows. They were eating their lunch when Taylor came in with his handman, and they pistol whipped those two young men. They were, I can't remember, they must have been maybe about 20 years old, 18, 20 years old. And he beat them up, and he took them to the sheriff that they were trespassing. The sheriff was Navarro, Ruben Navarro.
Sheriff, what's behind all the trouble you're having down here in Costilla County?
Well, I believe the basic trouble is the fact that there's a dispute as to who has what rights on this 77,000 acre tract.
You think that's basically the problem?
I believe that's basically the problem.
Mr. Taylor tells us that he feels it's a conspiracy among the Spanish American people who are anti-Anglo. Do you feel there's anything to that?
Absolutely not. We don't have any trouble with anyone else. We have several other big ranchers here. We don't have that kind of a problem.
He was a guy about 6 feet tall or over, and he weighed over about 350 pounds.
Now, Sheriff, let's go to the night the day, I guess it was, that you arrested Mr. Taylor and his two employees. You brought them in here, you had some trouble, didn't you, from a crowd outside this building?
Well, in the afternoon, after we had gotten the warrants from the district attorney, we went to his ranch to arrest these three men. When we met with them, we arrested them, and two of them came with me in the car, and the undersheriff went with Mr. Taylor. He wanted to unload some valuables and change clothes. We had the other two men in custody in jail, and Mr. Taylor wanted to come in here to use the phone to make his legal phone call. And while we was in here, a few of them gathered outside wanting to not let me release Taylor, to put him in jail. Also, some of them wanted to get at him, which I couldn't have them do either way.
Would you say it was a dangerous situation here that day?
Well, you never know how dangerous it is, but I was a little worried. I didn't expect that much trouble.
He got on top of him so that the people wouldn't shoot him.
Are you serious?
Really?
It was like a riot?
It was a riot.
Mr. Taylor tells us that he still fears for his own safety. Do you think there's any danger that he might be hurt in this community?
Well, I don't really think anyone will hurt him, although I couldn't be sure. If he takes the attitude to try to strong-arm people off of there, well, there is a possibility of trouble.
people up there, they used to have big meetings at the school in Chama, and they rattled all the people to fight him back, not to stand back. And he rattled the people to fight him back, and he got the people, and a lot of the people, they got him to united together to fight the Taylors. And that's how I got involved. One day I was going up to my place, and they were shooting at me, and because they made a roadblock, I was going to my property, and I turned around, and I went and I got my rifle. I had a 30-30 rifle, and I got plenty of cartridges. And I was on the tractor, and they were shooting on the side, trying to scare me, and I got down, and I said, come on, I'm fighting because I have a property, I have a reason to go up there.
Have you made any attempt to keep people off of Mr. Taylor's ranch? Do you stop them from going on?
Well, the only problem with this stopping from going up there is that in the past years they've had access up and down up there. Now I can't do that.
And he didn't only do that, he barricaded the ditches, registered ditches so that I could water. Bottom part where we used to cut grass, that's where we had to put our cattle. And then we had a drought, so it was very hard to maintain our cows, so we lost a lot of our cows. We lost them on account of that drought, and because we could not pasture the cows up there on the mountains like my dad and our ancestors did before. The more he did against the people, the more united the people got. Mexicans is Mexicans is Mexicans is Mexican. And first of all, those Mexicans, they weren't Mexicans. They were United States citizens. You know, there were other lumber companies there before, but they don't cut clear cutting, and he was doing clear cutting. When you do clear cutting, you destroy the watersheds. The watersheds are they're like trees that protect the water from melting or the land to get all messed up. So he said he didn't care that he was going to cut clear cut, and that's when they started fighting him more. We went to local courts, and it landed all the way up there to the Supreme Court. We had very good lawyers. The lawyers were pro bono. Pro bono means that they were free. They weren't charging the people.
Even as some of the members die, others take over, and they keep it going.
It was Rel versus Taylor, and then when Mr. Rel passed away, they changed it to Lobato versus Taylor.
Lobato being who?
Eugene Lobato.
You.
Yeah, me. I had gone to Alaska to visit my son, and when I came back, I developed a blood clot on my lungs, a pulmonary. And I was recuperating at home. That's when the decision was given, and my cows were at the canyon, so the people went up there. I wish I would have been there, but the people, when they got the decision that we could go up there, they went up there and they got my cows. They gathered my cows and they put them on the mountain.
So what did that feel like to win?
I felt real good.
It was the end of a long fight. They kept on going, and there was a lot of things that happened with Taylor that could have soured them and made them give up, and they didn't give up. So it does create a bond in a community.
And just so you know, many of the attorneys that have worked on this case one of the most interesting, historic, and important cases in Colorado's legal history, and I think those judges recognize that.
Do you want me to start there? How I became a historian at the Fort Garland Museum was because I needed a job and it was open. It was kind of unbelievable how it happened that I got in there. Nancy Dick, who was the lieutenant governor at the time, had been to the museum in San Luis where I was the administrator or director, whatever. And she and I visited. She and I got to talking, and she was very nice. She was a very nice lady, and she told me, well, if you ever need anything, call me. And she gave me her phone number. So lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, the opening at Fort Garland Museum for Curator was announced, and I decided to apply. I knew that I was going to need a reference in Denver. So I called her up, and I told her, this is what's happening, and she said, don't worry, I'll talk to Barbara Sudler. She was the president of the Historical Society. So when I had my interview here in Denver, I remember Barbara Sudler was very sophisticated but rude, and she asked me one question that I don't know if I answered it well or very badly. She asked me if I knew that I had an accent in my English. I said, yes, I do, because I speak both English and Spanish. Would you like to hold this interview in Spanish? So I answered her. Kind of a flippant answer for somebody, but I thought, well, darn you, you know. So when I walked out of there, I never expected that they would hire me. And they did hire me, and that was to be a very interesting experience. Although the fort was in really bad shape, nothing had been done. What I figured were important things, you know, which number one was the inventory, which was cataloging what was in those rooms, cleaning up so there weren't cobwebs everywhere, and, you know, cleaning up and making it look nice. And so my job was cut out for me. I was there for 14 years. In September of 1954 is when Grandpa and I got married. I was 18 years old. But I was to return to college when I was in my 50s. I would think I was like maybe 55 when I decided that to prove something to myself, I would go back. And I got a minor in liberal arts in, I believe, 1997. I graduated with an associate degree. And I was on the honor roll at Adams State College. And of course, by 1988, I had started working on my colchas. I had gone to a workshop that Father Pat put on. The instructor was Olivama Tushar. Olivama Tushar was from Indiana, but originally she was from Chile. And she just did such a good presentation. She had this colcha that she made, and she inspired you to draw your own. She said, it doesn't make any difference if they're stick people. It doesn't make any difference what they look like. They're yours. So you need to try to draw your own designs. And so I was really inspired with her. I don't really know who came up with the name of colcha, except maybe it could have been that they made more colchas, which were blankets, in that period of time, and as they got more into a more aesthetic type of print, of design that they could hang on the wall, that they kept the name Colcha. It could have been. I'm not sure. I'm just guessing. It's actually a stitch. When I have my workshops, that's a stitch that I teach to students. And it's only one stitch, and it's called a Colcha stitch. And you don't have to use another stitch. That's all the stitch you use for Colcha.
Oh boy, when Mama started with the artwork, she was so involved in it. I thought it was, I think she was tricking me. Why? She was creating a lot of things. I thought she was tricking me because I liked it. I would help her do the dishes so that she could work on her Colcha.
I don't know. I never really expected to get caught up into art, but once I got into it, one of the reasons I wanted to focus on history was because I worked with history, number one, but the idea was what it would mean to my kids, to my family, to my children. Because my children didn't grow up with the same childhood I did, and they had never seen some of the things that I had. And I always wanted them to understand San Luis, understand the area. And I always felt that they didn't quite understand about why I liked San Luis. And some people just don't understand to this day that it was my hometown. It was my hometown, and when I was growing up, I never expected to leave my hometown. But doing some artwork and deciding to do Colchas, I decided, well, okay, I have a lot to draw from. I have a lot of things that I can draw from. I can draw on my memories. I can draw on the history that surrounds the area, and there is a lot of history there. And I'm hoping that in my Colchas it'll mean as much to my children as it does to me.
One of these days, what they're going to say, look at this big, all of this. It's going to be, all of them are masterpieces. They are like Van Gogh, like Picasso, like better than all of those guys. One of these days they're going to say, it was Josie.
As I leave something like this, it's more like a legacy for me, because explaining it, I might someday have written a book, but I have no intention of writing a book. So doing the Colcha was one way of conveying my feelings, and one way of conveying the historical area. Comparing my life and comparing my Colchas to a book is quite appropriate anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
As Mama used to say, as long as there's flour, lard, and salt, we'll never go hungry. And you know why? Because she was the best tortillera in the world, and she still is. We celebrated our 64th anniversary, and we still have tortillas and chili and potatoes. Between Mama and Grandpa, we did it.
Growing up, my sister and I spent a lot of time with our grandparents. And one of my favorite memories with Grandma and Grandpa was when they would sit us down and tell us stories. And these stories weren't stories that you could find in storybooks. They were stories that were passed down through generations from, I guess, people's just imagination. And my favorite story was the one that Grandma used to tell us before she would put us to bed. I told the story to my daughter, and I hope that one day my daughter will tell it to her daughter. And that story is The Girl That Fell Down the Well. Enjoy.
there were two sisters, and there was a well in their front yard, and one of the sisters was had a really good attitude, and the other one had a bad attitude. She was negative, didn't do what she was told, and so on. The very good girl went to get some water out of the well, and she actually fell in. She was trying to get the bucket, and she fell in. And she went down, 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 and opened her eyes, and she was in this beautiful place, like this beautiful valley. And there was a house, a really neat little house, a little prim house, and a little old lady came out of the house and welcomed her. The lady invited her to stay with her, and she taught her how to fluff up the pillows, and she would fluff up the pillows in the morning. And that was the most important thing to the little old lady, that she fluffed the pillows just right and put them back on the bed and sweep and do things for her. And then she got homesick, and she got very homesick, and the old lady told her, okay, you stand in this doorway and you'll get a reward. You'll find yourself at home. And so she did what she was told. Her dress and apron and bonnet were full of gold pieces. And so she began to get the gold pieces off to give to her parents, and her parents were so happy to have her home. But of course, negative sister wasn't happy. Why does she have all this luck, you know? The sister related what happened to her, and she said, I'm going to go and get some of those gold coins. And so she jumped into the well. She didn't fall in, she jumped in. She was going to go find the old lady. Well, she found her, but somehow this negative girl wasn't going to do what she was told, right? Of course, negative people usually don't. And she wasn't always that good to the little old lady. She didn't fluff her pillows just right. She didn't do what she was told just right. But she ended up getting homesick just like her sister. And so the little old lady told her, okay, it's time for you to go home if you want to go home. And so she stood at the doorway, but instead of gold coins, she got tar all over her. And she was furious, and she was full of tar. And the moral story was, if you're good, well, you're going to get, the reward will be gold coins. If you don't, your reward will be tar.
Llegó un caballo y me dijo a su esposa, manchador de caballo, and look at your clothes. El mejor caballo que había en el range, le tiraba un cuadra, te volvía la change. El mejor caballo que había en el range, le tirabas un cuadra, te volvía la change. Ese caballo tan bonito que había en el range, se llamaba Strawberry Rose. Ding, ding.